In crypto, launch doesn't always mean the beginning. Very often, launch is actually the end. What you can do isn't to predict who will succeed, it is to learn how to distinguish one thing. A lot of projects are designed to launch. You write a contract, connect the front end, and bootstrap liquidity. And suddenly you call yourself a DEX, a DeFi protocol, a platform. But running a system over a longer period of time is a completely different ballgame.
Hey everyone, I'm YC, your host. Welcome to the Hard Truth in Crypto with Universe Pro. This is a podcast about the conversation most people avoid. The uncomfortable truth behind the crypto system. Here, we focus on one thing only: what is actually happening in crypto and why it ended up this way. This industry is very good at telling stories. It's much less good at talking about consequences. And today, we want to start with something very real. Before we begin, this channel is supported by Universe Pro. Universe Pro is an all-in-one decentralized exchange, but on this show, we don't sell product. We don't run feature walkthrough. Universe Pro simply provides the space. So, honest industry conversation can happen. And for our very first episode, we invited someone who fits in this discussion. Please welcome Universe Pro CEO, Mr. Phil.
Hey YC, it's been some time. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's really been a while. If I remember correctly, the last time we met was just before Christmas. So, how have things been? What have you been busy with lately?
Honestly, a lot of flying. I just got back from Germany and took my flight from Vienna to Malaysia. Most of it was tied to the official launch of Universe Pro DEX on January the 25th. Around a launch like that, everything compresses at once. You're meeting institutional investors, talking with different regional key opinion leaders, future collaborations are planned, and at the same time, you have to double check the system again and again. It's exhausting, but it's also the kind of exhaustion that feels meaningful.
That sounds like kind of busy, where time almost disappeared. So, I'm guessing the DEX has been doing reasonably well since the launch.
I wouldn't say it's perfect, not even close, but the data tells us one important thing. People are actually using it. In less than a month, we've expanded into more than 20 countries with over 10,000 users. Those aren't projections or marketing numbers. That's just what the system produces. What matters more to me, though, is what comes next. Launching something is just the beginning. Now, the real work is refining the system, making it more stable, more intuitive, and more accessible to everyday users. Because if decentralized apps only work for a small group of highly technical users, then this industry doesn't really scale.
I completely agree with that. A lot of users don't leave crypto because they dislike the idea. They leave because the experience is fragmented, confusing, and unnecessarily complex. But let's move past the warm up, okay? This is a podcast about telling the truth, not a promotion show. We are going to talk about things that are uncomfortable but real. So, are you ready for that? Because some of my questions won't be easy.
That's fine. I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay, let's begin properly. Phil, before we dive into today's topic, I don't want you to walk us through the resume. What I'm more curious about is this. When did you first enter the crypto space? And at that time, what really pulled you in? What was the one thing that made you stay?
Thank you for that first question. And obviously, like we all, I also have my personal crypto story. I first learned about Bitcoin around 2014, but it was just a little bit too early. I didn't fully understand it. I wasn't hooked. But a few years later, a few friends introduced me to it again. And from that moment on, I read up on it. I learned about it. I learned about blockchain, crypto, Bitcoin, all the other assets that followed. And what should I say? I fell in love. I took the worst time to enter the market. I entered the market when there was high prices in Bitcoin, and I keep saying I was the last person to buy before everybody sold. But at the same time, this was an amazing journey for me because it allowed me to use one of my key strengths to really make my way into the industry. And this is my stubbornness. I'm a very stubborn person. and I like to stick with stuff. You could call me old fashioned. And I sticked with Bitcoin. And in 2020, it finally made sense. It finally was a lot of fun. And I joined the industry full time. I worked with different kind of market participants over the years. And what really pulled me into it was this builder spirit, was that suddenly people had the ability to produce something, put it on the blockchain, and have it there forever. What made me stay was working with these individuals, helping them to scale their operation, helping them with their ideation and market entries. And this is also what I still love. And that's why I'm talking to you today, because this is also what I want to do with Universe Pro, establish something in the market long term, something that lasts and something that people can rely on.
That's great to hear. So you're now the CEO of Universe Pro, but today isn't about the product demo or feature list, just to help the listener to understand your perspective. So can you describe in the simplest possible sentence what Universe Pro is actually trying to do?
At its core, Universe Pro is doing something very simple. We're treating decentralized trading as a complete system and not as a feature. Not solving an isolated problem, not building one standalone model, but starting from how real trading actually happens and designing spot derivatives, liquidity, and data inside a single decentralized framework. We didn't build Universe Pro because the market needed another DEX. We built it because many existing systems were never really designed to be used long term.
That line you just said really stuck with me. Many systems were never designed to use to be long term. Okay, that brings us directly to today's topic: why most crypto systems don't survive. From your experience actually building system, is it more of a market problem or is it fundamentally a system design problem?
Well, I think there is one thing people don't like. In this industry, a lot of projects are designed to launch. You write a contract, connect a front end, and bootstrap liquidity. And suddenly you call yourself a DEX, a DeFi protocol, a platform. But running a system over a longer period of time is a completely different ballgame.
I want to push this into a territory that people talk about privately but rarely addressed clearly in the public. Are there projects where the act of launching is already the finish line?
I can't and won't point any fingers at specific projects. But speaking honestly, as somebody that looks at systems for the long term, yes, there are structures in this industry that are effectively complete at launch. Their objective isn't long term operation, it's to complete an issuance, complete a narrative, complete a liquidity event. Whether the systems is still functional afterwards was never central to the design.
When people talk about rug pulls, it often a vague accusation. From a system design perspective, what kind of structures are inherently close to that risk?
I prefer to think of so called rug pulls as a system basically built without responsibility. And there are a few dangerous signals. First, the system's definition of success is entirely tied to short term post launch events. Things like the launch day TVL, early trading volume, initial community hype, but it never answers a basic question: what happens 3 months later if no new capital comes in? Secondly, all meaningful risk is pushed onto the user: liquidity risk, price risk, contract risk. The system itself, no matter what happens, has already achieved its goal. That's not decentralization. That's asymmetric responsibility.
How do you tell the differences between a team that simply lacks capability and one that never intended to be accountable long term?
It's actually not that hard. You look at whether anyone is responsible for the day the system fails. If a project has no one accountable for worst case outcomes, no one is willing to say, this is my system, and every design assumption is based on, as long as the market is good, it works, then you should be very clear about one thing. Isn't a capability problem, it's a motivational problem. Teams that lack ability usually acknowledge problems. Systems that were never meant to last never seriously discuss failure.
Let's bring this back to DEX specifically. Are there decentralized exchange that, structurally speaking, suffer from the same issue? On the surface, they look like protocols, but underneath, they behave more like a one-time event.
Yes, and this is exactly a long ignored issue in the DEX space. Some DEXs are designed around a very specific logic. They treat decentralization as a disclaimer, push all the risk onto the user, and treat this is a protocol as the end of responsibility. But if a DEX has no systemic protection under extreme market conditions, then it isn't neutral. It is simply choosing to not bear consequences. When a system is designed from day one with no intention of being accountable to long term users, then the distance between it and the words people whisper privately is actually very small.
Listening to you describe it in this way, it sounds like Universe Pro deliberately avoided that kind of structure from the very beginning.
Yes, when we were building Universe Pro, we set one clear baseline. This system must not only make sense on the day it launches. If a system can continuously operate with no new narratives, no new capital, and we would still be willing to stand behind it, only then it deserves to exist. If there were ever a day when I wasn't willing to take long term commitment for a system, I would rather not launch it at all.
The industry is deep and complicated. So, for everyday user, how do they actually protect themselves in crypto space?
Never assume that a system's goal is aligned with your own. In crypto, launch doesn't always mean the beginning. Very often, launch is actually the end. What you can do isn't to predict who will succeed, it is to learn how to distinguish one thing. Is this system preparing for a long term existence, or is it simply exploiting a temporary window? Once you can tell who plans to stay and who is just passing through, you've already avoided some of the most expensive mistakes that you can make in this industry.
What you just said touches something many people intuitively feel, but very few are willing to articulate. In this industry, we are trained to ask questions like, will this project succeed? But you're not offering a completely different lens. You're not talking about success or failure. You're talking about alignment of intent. So, if a system is designed from the start to only compete a specific window of opportunity, then no matter how exciting it looks in the short term, the risk for long-term user was already written into the structure. So that brings up another question for me. When we talk about rugs, failure, or even system collapse, many people attributed them to bad luck or to the market moving too fast. But listening to your analysis, it sounds like the outcome are often not accident at all. They are just consequences that were already accepted during the design phase. So let's bring this back to what you know best. In your view, what is the biggest lie in the DEX industry?
In crypto, popularity and hype has never meant safety. I think the biggest lie in the tech space is this: as long as it's on chain and non custodial, it's naturally fairer and safer. That statement is quite dangerous, precisely because it sounds like truth. But being on chain only means the rules are written down and transparent for everybody. It doesn't automatically make a system more reliable. Many DEXs don't fail because of decentralization. They fail because they use decentralization as a liability shield. For example, if the user experience is terrible, they will tell you that's just how on chain works. If something breaks during extreme volatility, they say the market risk is your responsibility. If there are obvious design flaws, they say the contract is open source. You should have read it. Each excuse sounds reasonable on its own, but in reality, they all shift systemic responsibility onto users. True decentralized trading should mean transparent rules, predictable risk, and a system that is prepared for worst case scenarios, not a single sentence of "you're on your own" used to dismiss everything else. That's why I call it the biggest lie, turning decentralization into a moral high ground, and then using it to hide the fact that the system was never ready to be used long term.
Let me follow this line of thoughts with one more question. And I'll admit, this is where I'll give you a very brief ad moment. How does Universe Pro avoid becoming this kind of system that we were just talking about?
I actually get a little bit of nervous when this question comes up because I don't want today's episode to be a shill session about Universe Pro. So let me answer it differently. Universe Pro isn't a system that never makes mistakes. We're humans as you are. What we refuse to allow from the very beginning is for the system to rely heavily on wrong logics. One very real problem in the DEX industry is platforms only function when the market is hot, when volume is high, and liquidity is endless. Everything looks fine, but the moment the market cools, all the weakness surfaces at once. Execution slows, slippage widens, and system stability starts to degrade. So the first question we asked at Universe Pro wasn't how do we maximize volume? It was the opposite. We asked ourselves if trading volume dropped to 1/10 of today's levels, would the system still work? Would the system still be stable? It's not a sexy question, but it determines whether a system survives. Another deeply underestimated issue is fragmentations. DEXs keep adding more features, but the trading process keeps getting more broken, more complicated. Users are forced to jump between models, interfaces, dashboards, tools, just to complete a single trading decision. Universe Pro started from a very simple mindset: design decentralized trading as one system, not a collection of stitched together features. We want users to complete what actually matters to them in one place instead of spending energy fighting the tools themselves. So, if there is one real difference with Universe Pro, it's not a specific feature, it's an attitude. We assume markets will cool. We assume that some users will leave. We assume worst case scenarios will happen. If the system still holds under those assumptions, only then we're willing to move forward with it. I've always believed this. The most important highlight of a trading platform isn't how it performs on its best day, it's whether it can still stand on its worst day. Universe Pro, at least by design, is built for these days.
That makes sense. So let me push a little bit further. What do you think most of the DApps or DAX fail to retain their user? So people come once and then they are gone. And Universe Pro was born specifically to address this pain point. So here's a question that might get you some backlash. Do you think this industry needs more regulation?
I don't necessarily think that what this industry really needs is regulation. What it needs is responsibility. Regulation defines boundaries. Responsibility is something you design into a system. If no one is accountable from the start, then adding more regulation just becomes patchwork.
So what's that one thing you absolutely unwilling to compromise on right now?
Well, currently, there's only one thing we refuse to compromise on: trading long term structure for short term metrics. This industry is full of compromises that look clever. For example, accepting designs you don't really believe in just to boost volume, tolerating mechanisms that work short term but are harmful over time, just to create hype. These problems don't show immediately, but given enough time, they will always come back to damage the system itself. Inside Universe Pro, we have a very clear rule. If a decision requires us to lie to ourselves first, then it's the wrong decision. Going slower is fine, but we refuse to justify an unhealthy system with, we will fix it later.
And if the market doesn't reward that approach, what then?
That's a question many people avoid answering honestly. If the market doesn't respond in short term, we ask ourselves one thing first. Did the market not understand us yet? Or did we actually get it wrong? If we get it wrong, we fix it. That part is simple. But if we are confident the system is logically good and the only issue is that it's not exciting enough, not fast enough, not easy to sell as a story, then we keep going. Markets don't always reward the right things immediately, but time does. I would rather Universe Pro to be a system that's slowly understood than a product that is quickly consumed.
Okay, Phil, let me end with this. Do you think it's still worth entering the blockchain and crypto industry today, or is it too late?
I'll be very honest, whether it's too late depends entirely on why you want to enter this industry. If you're here to chase the next spike on Bitcoin or meme coins, the next narrative cycle, or to quickly replicate someone else's success, then yes, you might be right, you might be late. But if you're here to build or participate in a system that is meant to exist long term, real infrastructure that solves real problems, then this industry is only beginning to getting serious. Crypto doesn't lack participation anymore. What it lacks are people who are actually willing to stay. So I often put it this way: if you're here to gamble on an opportunity, you're probably late, and I wouldn't advise you to do so. If you're here to build for the long term, this is exactly the right time to join us and to make a difference.
I completely agree with that. The word especially, if you're here for long term, now is exactly the right time. So let me ask you one final question. What does Universe Pro want to leave behind in this industry?
I don't want Universe Pro to be remembered as a project from a particular market cycle, from a particular narrative. If one day people look back at our industry, I would rather have them say something much simpler. Something like, at least some people took decentralized trading seriously as a long term responsibility. Universe Pro doesn't need to be the biggest, it doesn't need to be the fastest, but I hope it's the kind of system that people still choose to use after the market cools and after all this noise fades. If we leave anything behind, it won't be a feature or a number. It will be a shared understanding that decentralized trading can be built seriously, responsibly, and for the long run.
I don't think today's conversation gave us clear-cut answer, but it did something more important. It brought a lot of questions we usually avoid back onto the table. We talk about why systems fail, why some projects were never designed to last, and how decentralization is sometimes used as an excuse rather than a principle. These uncomfortable topics, but if an industry can't discuss them honestly, it's very hard for it to truly mature. Phil, thank you for your honesty today and for being willing to speak from the position of someone who is actually taking responsibility for a system. So I'll end with this. If you could leave just one sentence for everyone still in crypto, what would it be?
Don't let the next opportunity, the next shiny object, pressure you into trusting a system you don't truly understand. In this industry, the most expensive mistakes aren't made by misreading the market. They are made by giving your time, trust, and capital to systems that never intended to walk with you for the long run.
Thank you, Phil. And thank you to everyone who stayed with us until the end. If you found value in today's conversation, share with people who are genuinely thinking seriously about this industry. We'll see you next time.